The barren wasteland of Mycaron 4 stretched endlessly under a rust-colored sky, its cracked terrain littered with the remnants of battle. The air shimmered with heat, but that wasn't why Admiral Xelorn of the Sxillar fleet felt uneasy. It was the humans. Specifically, their medics. Xelorn reviewed the battle footage on the command deck, his 3 luminous eyes scanning the recording of a skirmish from earlier that day. The humans' front line had been ambushed, their soldiers scattered in chaotic retreat. A typical scenario, yet something extraordinary had occurred. Despite the chaos, a small team of human medics, unarmed and vastly outnumbered, had stormed into the fray. They extracted wounded soldiers with impossible precision, dragging them back to safety with such unrelenting focus that they had ignored all risks. Admiral Xelorn, said a junior officer with a voice quivering like a faulty sonar. The medics again. I know. Xelorn cut him off. His mandibles clicked nervously. Humans never leave their injured behind. It's unnatural, illogical, dangerous. A soft chime alerted the crew to the arrival of a tactical report. Xelorn glanced at the display and stiffened. Another human strike team had entered the region, this one led by Captain Lukas Hale, a name that sent ripples of dread through the Sxillar ranks. Not because of Hale's combat tactics, those were commendable if not exceptional, but because of his reputation for organizational technology. "Monitor all human movements," Xelorn ordered. "I want their medics tracked at all times. They're the key to this madness." Far below on the surface, Captain Lukas Hale adjusted the strap of his field kit and surveyed the terrain. His uniform was caked in dust, but his eyes gleamed with determination. Around him, the chaos of battle raged, yet his mind was focused on a singular mission, getting Private Drennan out alive. Hale's comm crackled with the voice of Lieutenant Sora. "Captain, enemy units are converging on your position. Recommend fallback." "Negative," Hale replied, his voice calm despite the explosions rocking the ground nearby. "We don't leave people behind. Mark Drennan's last coordinates." A drone zipped overhead, its holographic display highlighting a collapsed structure where Drennan had been seen last. Hale signaled to his team. "Gear up, we're going in." The team moved with practiced efficiency, their medics at the center. Despite their lack of weapons, the medics carried an arsenal of tools: portable exoskeletons for lifting debris, nanite injectors to stabilize the injured, and a strange, almost reckless courage that seemed to defy common sense. As they approached the structure, a Sxillar patrol emerged, their biomechanical armor glinting ominously. Hale's soldiers opened fire, engaging the enemy while the medics pressed forward, undeterred. Inside the wreckage, Hale found Drennan pinned under a twisted beam, his breathing shallow but steady. "Hang on, soldier," Hale said, kneeling beside him. "We've got you." The medics worked quickly, their hands steady even as plasma bolts screamed overhead. They injected Drennan with a stabilizer and attached an exoskeletal brace to his leg. Within moments, he was ready to be moved. "Evac in 3, Hale shouted, hoisting Drennan onto his shoulders. The retreat was harrowing, with enemy fire intensifying as the Sxillar realized what was happening. Hale's team formed a protective line, their medics hustling the wounded back to the extraction point. Watching from orbit, Xelorn felt a surge of frustration. Why did they risk so much for a single soldier, he muttered. What did they gain from this insanity? An intelligence officer ventured a theory. Perhaps it's a strategy to demoralize us. Their refusal to abandon the injured could be a psychological tactic. Xelorn wasn't convinced. No, it's more than that. They care. The word felt alien in his mandibles, and he spat it out as if it burned. The humans escaped with Drennan, leaving the Sxillar bewildered and infuriated. But Xelorn's unease grew. This wasn't the first time human medics had defied logic, and he feared it wouldn't be the last. Later that night, Hale's team regrouped at a temporary base. Drennan, now stable, gave Hale a weak smile. "Thanks, Captain. Thought I was done for." Hale clapped him on the shoulder. "Not on my watch." As the team settled in, Hale couldn't shake the feeling that the sister security were watching them, studying their every move. And he was right. High above, Xelorn stared at the latest reconnaissance footage, his three eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Ah, medics," Xelorn said, turning to his officers. "Find out everything you can about them. If we're to defeat the humans, we must understand what drives this madness." But as Xelorn would soon discover, understanding human medics was no simple task, for in their relentless dedication lay a force more terrifying than any weapon: the unyielding belief that no one should be left behind. The dim blue light of Xelorn's war room cast eerie shadows across the alien tactical screens, each one displaying data streams about human medical units. The Admiral leaned forward, his mandibles twitching as he reviewed intercepted communications and heat maps. Every battle, every human action seemed to circle back to the same maddening principle. The medics never abandoned anyone. "Admiral," said Officer Bran, her segmented arms folding nervously, "we've analyzed their field reports. The humans seem to prioritize extraction missions over maintaining offensive positions. It's unprecedented." Xelorn's eyes burned with irritation. Prioritizing extraction at the cost of victory. How do they call this warfare? Bran hesitated, then ventured, "Perhaps they find honor in it." "Honor doesn't win wars," Xelorn snapped. "They're either fools or—" A loud chime interrupted. Bran checked the alert and stiffened. "Admiral, a small human squad has entered Sector 12. Their trajectory suggests they're en route to the old mineral refinery. One of their injured soldiers was last reported there." Xelorn's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Perfect. Dispatch units 4 and 5. We'll make them pay for their obsession with retrieving the broken." Far below, Lukas Hale crouched in the shadow of a jagged cliff, his team gathered around him. Their target was a dilapidated refinery, a relic of the Scylla's mining efforts long abandoned due to hazardous conditions. The facility had since become a treacherous maze of collapsed tunnels and unstable ceilings, in an ideal trap. "We're running on borrowed time," Lieutenant Sora whispered, scanning the area with her thermal scope. "Sxillar patrols are closing in." "We only need a few minutes," Hale replied. He glanced at their medic, a wiry man named Fallon, who carried a pack stuffed with advanced equipment. "Fallon, you ready?" Fallon adjusted his gloves, his face grim but resolute. "Ready as I'll ever be." The team pushed forward, moving carefully through the refinery's rubble-strewn corridors. The air was thick with dust, and every step echoed ominously. They soon found their target, Corporal Mira, trapped in a small cavity beneath a collapsed beam. Her helmet light flickered weakly, illuminating her pale, battered face. "Hale," she rasped, "didn't think you'd come." Hale crouched beside her. "You know better than that. We always come." As Fallon began his work, injecting Mira with stabilizers and attaching a brace to her shattered arm, the rest of the team set up a defensive perimeter. Sora's thermal scope picked up movement. Sxillar troops were converging fast. "They're coming," she said tersely. "Hold them off," Hale ordered, his voice steady. The 6-ton of biomechanical soldiers surged through the refinery, their weapons lighting up the darkness. Hale's team fought back fiercely, using the narrow corridors to their advantage. Still, The enemy's numbers were overwhelming, and it became clear they were stalling for time. Fallon finished his work and gave Hale a nod. She's stable, but she won't make it far on her own. Hale hoisted Mira onto his shoulders, his muscles straining under the weight. Then we carry her. Everyone, fall back. The team moved as one, retreating through the twisting corridors with the Sxillar in hot pursuit. Explosions rocked the refinery, sending debris raining down. In the chaos, Fallon stumbled, his pack spilling its contents. Without hesitation, he scrambled to retrieve the vital equipment, ignoring the plasma bolts scorching the ground around him. "Fallon, leave it!" Sora shouted. "I can't," he shot back. "We might need it." Hale turned, covering Fallon as he secured the last of his gear. The delay cost them precious seconds, and the Sxillar closed the gap. Watching from his command center, Xelorn saw an opportunity. Cut off their escape, herd them toward the central chamber. The Sxillar forces adapted quickly, funneling the humans into a large open room. Hale's team found themselves cornered, the walls lined with jagged machinery and unstable beams. "Not good," Sora muttered. Hale assessed their situation, his mind racing. The Sxillar were advancing steadily, their weapons raised. But then his gaze fell on the machinery. "Fallon," he said, "how much explosive do we have left?" "Enough to make a mess," Fallon replied. "Good. Rig the support beams. We're bringing this place down." Fallon hesitated. "We'll be buried with them." "Not if we time it right." "Ah." Hale looked at Sora. "Find us a path out, anything." Sora's scanner swept the room, and she found a narrow surface tunnel leading to the surface. "It's tight, but it'll do." As Fallon set the charges, the Sxillar grew impatient and surged forward. Hale and Sora held them off, buying precious seconds. When the explosives were ready, the team bolted for the tunnel. "Fallon, now!" Hale shouted. The charges detonated with a deafening roar, collapsing the chamber and cutting off the Sxillar pursuit. Dust and debris filled the air, but the humans emerged from the tunnel, battered but alive. Back in orbit, Xelorn watched the scene unfold with mounting frustration. The humans had escaped again, their injured soldier in tow. "How?" Xelorn growled. "How do they keep doing this?" Bran shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps they're just better at surviving than we are." Xelorn's mandibles twitched violently. "No, it's more than survival. It's an obsession, a sickness. They treat their wounded like prized relics, risking everything to save them. We need to exploit this weakness." But deep down, Xelorn couldn't shake a gnawing thought. What kind of beings valued life so highly that they would defy all logic to preserve it? And what did that make the Sxillar in comparison? The skies above Micron Orb glowed faintly with the light of distant stars, their serene beauty a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding on the ground. Lukas Hale's team moved carefully through a dense forest of crystalline trees, their jagged trunks refracting the dim light into eerie patterns. Every step crunched on brittle shards underfoot, each sound echoing ominously. "To the hijack? Status on Mira?" Hale asked, his voice low but steady. Fallon jogged to keep pace, his pack rattling. "She's stable for now. The stabilizers will hold another 6 hours, maybe, but she needs a proper medical facility soon." Hale nodded, his jaw tight. They were hours from extraction, the terrain rough and the Sxillar patrols relentless. "We'll get her there," he said, more to himself than to Fallon. Ahead, Sora raised a fist, signaling the team to halt. She crouched, her thermal scanner humming softly as she surveyed the area. "Movement," she whispered. 6. Signatures, closing fast. Their eyes met in the gloom of the semi-darkness, though the camera angle of the occupants in the center made it. "Position?" Hale asked, his rifle at the ready. "Southwest. They're sweeping the area. We'll have to move, or they'll pin us down." Then we don't let them, Hale said. He gestured for the team to spread out. Fallon, stick close to Mira. Everyone else, defensive positions. The first wave of Sxillar soldiers burst through the undergrowth, their sleek forms moving with deadly precision. Plasma bolts lit the forest, the air crackling with heat. Hale's team responded with disciplined fire, using the crystal trees as cover. From their perch in orbit, Admiral Xelorn and his officers watched the skirmish unfold. "Admiral," Brian reported, her voice tinged with grim satisfaction, "our forces have engaged the humans. They're cornered." Xelorn leaned closer to the display, his three eyes narrowing. "They'll fight, of course, but watch the medics. That's where their weakness lies." True to Xelorn's observation, Fallon remained focused on shielding Mira, even as the battle raged around them. His medkit flashed as he adjusted the stabilizers, ignoring the plasma bolts striking dangerously close. "Fallon!" Sora shouted, firing from her position. "Get down, you idiot!" Fallon didn't flinch. If her vitals crash, she's done. Hale saw the Sxillar capitalizing on Fallon's exposed position, their soldiers coordinating a flanking maneuver. He swore under his breath. "Cover him!" The team adjusted, laying down suppressive fire to buy Fallon precious seconds. Hale charged forward, his rifle spitting bursts of energy as he intercepted the flanking Sxillar. "Fallon, you're clear. Move now!" Hale shouted. Fallon finally scrambled back with Mira, dragging her to a safer position. The rest of the team fell in behind them, retreating deeper into the crystalline forest. Xelorn's mandibles twitched in frustration as the humans slipped away again. "They react to the medics like hive drones protecting their queen," he muttered. "Their entire strategy revolves around keeping the wounded alive. Grover's job is to preserve his mission. Anybody who enters the system must end." "Should we tighten the net, Admiral?" Brian asked. Xelorn hesitated, his mind churning. "No, let them run. Herd them towards Sector 17. Brian tilted her head. "The abandoned mines?" "Exactly. We'll box them in, and when they're trapped, we'll see just how far their obsession with saving the broken will take them." On the ground, Hale's team pushed forward, exhaustion creeping into their movements. The crystalline trees began to thin, replaced by rocky outcroppings and jagged cliffs. Sora slowed, checking her scanner. "Captain, this isn't right," she said. What do you mean?" Hale asked. Sora pointed to her display. "The Sxillar are pushing us toward the old mining complex. If we go much further, we'll be boxed in." Hale frowned, studying the terrain. "What's the alternative? Double back and fight through their patrols?" "We can't outrun them," Fallon added, glancing at Mira's pale face. "And she won't make it through another firefight." Hale cursed under his breath. "Then we keep moving. We'll figure it out when we get there." The team pressed on, their path narrowing, as they entered the mining complex. The air grew colder, the faint hum of long-dead machinery echoing through the tunnels. "This place gives me the creeps," Sora muttered, scanning the dark corridors. "You're not alone," Fallon replied, his grip tightening on Mira's stretcher. They didn't have to wait long for the trap to spring. Sxillar's soldiers poured into the tunnels from multiple entrances, their biomechanical forms gleaming in the dim light. Hale's team took cover behind rusted mining equipment, the enclosed space amplifying every sound. "Fallon, how's she doing?" Hale called, firing over the edge of a collapsed conveyor belt. "Still stable, but we're running out of time," Fallon shouted back. Sora threw a grenade, the explosion sending a group of Sxillar scattering. "We're pinned, Captain. What's the play?" Hale's mind raced. The odds were stacked against them, and the Sxillar were closing in. But then, his gaze fell on an ancient mining transport, its bulky frame half buried in debris. "We make a stand." Hale said. Fallon, load Mira onto that transport. Sora, rig what explosives we have left to cover our retreat. You want to use that thing? Fallon asked incredulously. It's old, but it'll move, Hale replied. Get it ready, now. The team sprang into action, fighting off waves of Sxillar as they prepared the transport. Fallon worked quickly, securing Mira onto the vehicle's bed and rigging the engine for a rough start. Ready, Fallon shouted. Hale climbed onto the transport, helping Sora onto the driver's seat. Punch it! The transport roared to life, its engine sputtering but holding. Sora steered it through the tunnels, the team firing from the sides as the Sxillar gave chase. Explosions rocked the complex as Sora's charges detonated, collapsing several tunnels and cutting off the pursuing soldiers. But the victory was short-lived. As the transport burst into the open air, they found themselves facing a Sxillar command squad, their weapons trained and ready. Hale gritted his teeth, raising his rifle. This is it. Hold the line. Before the Sxillar could fire, the sky above erupted in a blaze of light. A human dropship descended rapidly, its cannons unleashing a torrent of fire that scattered the Sxillar. Extraction team inbound, a voice crackled over Hale's comm. Get your people on board. The dropship touched down, its rear ramp lowering. Hale and his team rushed aboard, Fallon carrying Mira with one last surge of strength. As the dropship lifted off, Hale looked out at the retreating Sxillar forces. He felt a grim satisfaction, but knew the battle wasn't over. The Sxillar had learned something today. Something dangerous. And Xelorn, watching the humans escape yet again, felt his frustration boil over. He slammed his clawed hand onto the console, cracking the surface. They are insufferable, he hissed. But they will falter. No one can sustain this madness forever. Brienne hesitated before speaking. Admiral, what if it isn't madness? What if it's strength? Xelorn glared at her, his mandibles twitching. Strength? Or a delusion of morality that we will exploit to its breaking point? The interior of the dropship hummed with the low thrum of its engines, a steady sound that should have been comforting but wasn't. Luctus, Haul-in, Hayale, sat slumped against a bulkhead, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Across from him, Fallon was hunched over Mira, checking her vitals. She'll make it, Fallon said finally, his voice heavy with relief. We got her in time. Hale nodded but didn't respond. His mind wasn't on the soldier they just saved. It was on the Sxillar. They were adapting, learning. This extraction had been too close. Sora, seated beside him, broke the silence. They're figuring us out, Captain. That trap wasn't random. I know, Hale replied. Next time they'll be smarter. How do we fight that? Fallon asked, his voice tinged with frustration. They know how we operate. They're targeting our medics because they know we won't leave anyone behind. Hale looked at him, his jaw set. We keep doing what we're doing. If they think they can break us by going after our medics, they're in for a surprise. The dropship docked with the orbiting carrier, the hiss of the pressurizing airlock signaling their arrival. As the team disembarked, a figure in a pristine uniform strode toward them, a tall man with a sharp, no-nonsense expression. Commander Delmar. Hail, Delmar said, his voice crisp. Be brief in 20 minutes, and bring your team. Yes, sir, Hale replied, suppressing a groan. 20 minutes later, they were seated in a sterile briefing room, the hum of the carrier's systems faint in the background. Delmar stood at the head of the table, a holographic display of Mikaron 5 hovering beside him. The Sxillar are escalating, Delmar began. We've intercepted communication suggesting they're focusing their efforts on our medical operations. They see our medics as a liability they can exploit. Not a liability, Fallon muttered under his breath. Delmar's sharp gaze pinned him in place. Care to repeat that, Corporal? Fallon squared his shoulders. With all due respect, sir, our medics aren't a liability. They're why we're still standing. If the Sxillar think otherwise, let them. It'll be their mistake. Delmar's expression softened slightly. I don't disagree, but we can't ignore the reality that their tactics are evolving. Admiral Xelorn isn't a fool. He's studying us, and he'll keep pressing until he finds a way to break our resolve. Hale leaned forward. What's our move, sir? Delmar tapped a control on the table, and the hologram shifted to display a Sxillar stronghold, a massive structure embedded into the side of a mountain, bristling with defenses. This is Outpost Cerat, Delmar said. It's one of their primary command centers in this sector. Intel suggests they're holding several human prisoners there, including medics from other units. We believe the Sxillar are trying to analyze their techniques and equipment. Fallon's fists clenched. They're experimenting on them? Possibly, Delmar said grimly. That's why this mission is high priority. We're sending you in to extract the prisoners and destroy the facility. Sora raised an eyebrow. Sounds straightforward enough? Delmar gave a humorless smile. It won't be. The outpost is heavily fortified, and the terrain makes a stealth approach nearly impossible. You'll have to fight your way in. Good, Hale said. We're getting our people back. Hours later, Hale's team descended toward the mountain under cover of darkness. Their transport hovered just above the treetops, its engines muffled to reduce detection. You all know the drill, Hale said, checking his gear. We go in fast, neutralize resistance, and get our people out. No one gets left behind. The team nodded, their faces grim but determined. The drop went smoothly, the transport's engines flaring briefly before it pulled away. Hale's team landed in a dense forest at the base of the mountain, the towering trees casting long shadows under the faint moonlight. Path to the outposts, Hale asked, his voice low. Sora consulted her scanner. There's a service tunnel that runs along the western ridge. It's narrow, but it'll get us close without exposing us to their main defenses. Good. Fallon, you've got point. Let's move. They advanced cautiously, their movements silent and precise. The service tunnel was just as Sora had described, a narrow passage carved into the rock, its walls slick with condensation. They moved single file, their footsteps muffled against the damp ground. As they approached the outpost, Fallon raised a hand, signaling the team to stop. He pointed to a cluster of motion sensors embedded in the rock. Sensors are active, Fallon whispered. Give me a second. He crouched beside the nearest sensor, pulling a small device from his pack. With practiced ease, he bypassed the system, creating a temporary blind spot. Clear, he said, stepping back. They continued forward, emerging from the tunnel onto a ledge overlooking the outpost. The structure was massive, its jagged architecture blending seamlessly with the mountain. Bright floodlights illuminated the perimeter, and patrols of Sxillar soldiers moved in precise formations. How do we get past that? Sora whispered. Hale studied the scene, his mind working quickly. We create a distraction. Sora, Fallon, you'll set charges along the eastern ridge, make it loud. The rest of us will hit the main entrance, while their attention is diverted. Got it, Sora said, pulling explosives from her pack. The team split up, moving quickly and quietly. Sora and Fallon worked efficiently, planting charges along the ridge, while the others positioned themselves near the entrance. Minutes later, a series of explosions rocked the mountainside, sending debris and dust flying. Alarms blared, and the Sxillar patrols scrambled toward the eastern ridge. Move! Hale shouted, leading the charge toward the entrance. The team breached the outpost, their weapons blazing. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, each one more heavily guarded than the last, but they pushed forward, their resolve unshaken. They found the prisoners in a dimly lit chamber, their faces pale and gaunt. Among them were 3 medics, their uniforms tattered but their spirits unbroken. "You're here," one of them said, his voice weak but filled with relief. "Of course we are," Hale said, helping him to his feet. "We don't leave anyone behind." The extraction was chaotic, with Sxillar reinforcements closing in from all sides. But Hale's team held the line, their determination unwavering. As the dropship arrived to extract them, Hale looked back at the outpost, now a smoking ruin. They had won this round, but he knew the war was far from over. And somewhere in the depths of his flagship, Xelorn watched the battle's aftermath with a mixture of rage and admiration. The humans had struck another blow, their medics defying all logic once again. "They'll push us to the edge," Xelorn said quietly, "and when they do, we'll finally see what it takes to break them." But deep down, a part of him wondered if such a thing was even possible. The Sxillar fleet orbited McChiron III in silent formation, their sleek ships glinting against the black void of space. Within the command vessel, Admiral Xelorn stood before a massive tactical display, his mandibles grinding softly in thought. He had just received the latest report from Outpost Cerat, total destruction, every human prisoner evacuated, and their forces routed. Xelorn's officers avoided his gaze. The room buzzed with subdued tension. Finally, Brian broke the silence. "Admiral, the humans are proving difficult to predict. Their adaptability is remarkable." "Remarkable," Xelorn hissed, his mandibles snapping. "Their obsession with preserving the weak undermines everything about warfare. Yet they defy all logic and succeed. They should be broken by now. They should have fallen." Brian hesitates. What if their resilience stems from this obsession? Their medics unite them, driving their soldiers to fight harder because they know... "Enough," Xelorn interrupted, raising a clawed hand. "If their medics are the glue holding them together, then we must break that bond. And we will, no matter the cost." A plan began to form in his mind. He turned to the intelligence officer. "Issue an open transmission to the human fleet. Use their frequency. Tell them we have wounded prisoners at Outpost Cerat." Brian's 3 eyes widened. "You want to draw them into another trap?" "Now a trap," Xelorn said coldly. "A slaughter. We'll make this their breaking point." On board the UNS Resolute, Hale's team had just returned from a debrief when the transmission came through. The message was simple and chilling. "To the human forces, we have captured wounded soldiers, abandoned during your retreat. If you value them, come retrieve them at Outpost Cerat. We will allow your medics to retrieve their injured without interference. This is your one and only chance." Hale stood in silence, the words reverberating through the briefing room. The Sxillar had never communicated like this before. It reeked of a trap. "Captain, they're baiting us," Sora said, her tone sharp. "Of course they are," Hale replied, his expression hard. "But if there's even a chance those prisoners are alive, we're going." Fallon slammed a hand onto the table. "We have to. They're counting on us. If the Psi-Lord think we'll abandon them, we need to prove them wrong. Again." Commander Delmar entered the room, his face grim. "Captain Hale, your team is being assigned to this mission. You'll take 2 squads as backup, but the primary objective is to extract the prisoners. Do not, under any circumstances, take unnecessary risks. This smells like a trap, and I don't want to lose more soldiers." "We understand, sir," Hale said, already forming a plan in his mind. Delmar hesitated and hailed good luck. The dropship descended toward Outpost Cerat under heavy cloud cover. Hale's team had prepared meticulously, every piece of equipment checked and rechecked. Yet there was an unspoken tension in the air, a shared knowledge that this mission could be their last. The outpost loomed ahead, a sprawling structure perched on the edge of a canyon. Its defenses seemed oddly quiet, the usual patrols and sentry turrets conspicuously absent. "Something's not right," Sora muttered, her eyes scanning the landscape. "It's never right," Fallon replied grimly. "It is." The dropship touched down, and Hale's team disembarked, moving cautiously toward the main gate. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant howl of wind through the canyon. "Eyes open," Hale said, his voice low. "Fallon, you're up." Fallon approached the gate and attached a portable scanner, his fingers flying over the controls. No traps on the gate itself, but I'm picking up strange energy signatures deeper inside. "Open it," Hale ordered. The gate creaked open, revealing a wide courtyard, littered with debris. At its center were several figures, human prisoners, their uniforms tattered, their faces pale with exhaustion. Medics from Hale's team rushed forward, scanning for injuries and preparing for transport. "We've got live ones," Fallon called out, relief evident in his voice. But Hale wasn't convinced. He scanned the surrounding buildings, his instincts screaming that something was wrong. "Fallon, get them stabilized fast," Hale said. "We're not staying long." Just as Fallon began his work, the first explosion ripped through the air. The ground shook violently as the Sxillars launched their ambush. Plasma fire rained down from concealed positions, forcing Hale's team into cover. "Here we go!" Sora shouted, returning fire. The Sxillar forces swarmed from hidden alcoves, their numbers overwhelming. They fired relentlessly, driving the humans back toward the gate. Fallon and the other medics worked frantically, shielding the injured as the battle raged around them. "We're pinned!" Sora shouted over the comms. Hale gritted his teeth to hold the line, protect the medics. As the chaos unfolded, Xelorn watched from his command center, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. "They've fallen into the trap," he said. "Now we crush them." But even as Xelorn gave the order to close the noose, something unexpected happened. Hale's team began to push back, their resolve unshaken. The medics continued their work, even as the Sxillar pressed harder. "We've got the prisoners," Fallon called. "They're ready for evac." Hale signaled to his squad, "Fall back to the dropship, cover the medics." The retreat was harrowing, the Sxillar relentless in their pursuit. But the humans fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, their determination to protect their comrades unyielding. The dropship's engines roared to life as the team reached the extraction point. Hale and Fallon were the last to board, dragging an injured soldier up the ramp as plasma fire streaked past them. "Go!" Hale shouted, and the dropship lifted off, narrowly avoiding a final barrage from the Sxillar. In the aftermath, Hale's team regrouped aboard the UNS Resolute, their bodies battered but their spirits unbroken. The prisoners they had rescued were weak but alive, their gratitude palpable. In the medbay, Fallon slumped into a chair, his exhaustion finally catching up to him. Hale stood nearby, watching as the rescued soldiers were treated. "We did it," Fallon said, his voice quiet. Hale nodded. "Yeah, we did." Meanwhile, aboard his flagship, Xelorn stared at the latest reports with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Every logical prediction, every carefully laid plan, had failed. "They don't stop," Xelorn muttered, his mandibles clicking softly. "No matter what we do, they keep fighting, they keep saving." Brian stood silently beside him, her expression unreadable. Xelorn turned to her, his voice heavy with a rare note of doubt. "What kind of creatures are they? How do you defeat an enemy that refuses to abandon the weak?" Brian didn't respond. Deep down, she wasn't sure there was an answer. And far away in the quiet corridors of the human carrier, Hale knew the truth. It wasn't about logic or strategy. It was about something deeper, something the Sxillar couldn't understand. The unshakable belief that no one was expendable. No one gets left behind. And that, Hale thought, was why they would win.